Okay, here we are, back into it then. How you doing, Marv? You alright, my chum?
Back in the mix. Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm feeling really knackered. I started a really early morning job, saving the world.
Do you work mornings, Marv? I don't think we've established that.
Yeah, I don't know how the loads of messages and texts that I give you a lot of the times where most of the text includes just because I'm really tired, or I am quite tired, or, I would do that, but I am tired. But you get up at 4:45 every morning and work 8 hours, saving lives in the country of everybody, and then come back and then do everything for everybody else, and then have no time for yourself.
Saving the world. That's a very sibilance. That is a strong phrase for it, my chum. You do a good job and you do it well. I also get up at 5 o'clock every morning. Well, not every morning, but, most mornings in the week. It's entertaining. Anyway, that's a tangent. What are we talking about this week, Marv? And before we go into what we're talking about, it's a bit of a special episode, isn't it, Marv?
I think it is a bit of a special episode. That is true. Are you talking because it's the week? It is now the week that the clocks go back.
That's that is important. However, there is another special reason as to why I mentioned in this episode has a special reason for it being special. And
that must be very special.
There's somebody else in this FaceTime, and he's not usually with us, Marv, is he? He's not usually with us. He's not usually prominent as a part of the process. Who is he, Marv?
No, not really, but he's a loving patron.
He is.
He's been with us from the start. He's listened to every episode.
Absolutely.
We've mentioned him a couple of times. He's always with us in spirit, but now he's with us in a physical form. Yes. I'd like to welcome Jack Sharp to the podcast.
Hey, yeah,
there he is.
Thanks for having me. I feel honoured to be the first guest on the 50 Ways, and of course, as Merritt, you hyped me up there. That is my sort of only accolade, and what I'm known for, listening to every episode of the 50 Ways podcast. So.
Don't shoot yourself down, mate. Don't shoot yourself down. Beautiful. You're a rock and roll legend, and we would be dead without you.
But yeah,
dead is an understatement.
I want to say thanks for having me. It's kind of nice that you have this format and these discussions, because it's the exact type of conversations that I'd hear walking past the front room in uni, where you'd be in your onesie, and Marv, you'd be eating your bowl of corn chicken pieces, I believe, just with spices, nothing else. Beautiful.
Corn pieces and couscous, microwave. I could only use the microwave at that point in my life as a 25-year-old man.
Beautiful. But yeah,
he really could. That is absolute fact.
I'm pleased to be here and to chat some good, some bad, some ugly albums with you guys. So,
Jack, why don't you just give us a kind of brief rundown of your life in music?
Yeah, I want to hear that.
Started. What were your kind of favorite bands, and I don't know, what's your journey?
Yeah, definitely. So the first album I owned was really gifted to me by my older cousin, as a lot of music is gifted through the family, and it was a Sum 41's All Killer No Filler from 2001.
Amazing.
Stellar album.
Amazing.
And sadly, it was the only album I kind of owned for a few years on my CD disc player. So I just listened to that at the back of the car on long journeys and things like that. And yeah, around the sort of age of 9 and 10, that's when I started watching music channels. That would come on like The Box and Scuzz, MTV Hits, that kind of thing. I started going into Woolworths and buying singles. Remember when you used to buy singles on CD? What a pleasure that was.
I do, yeah.
I can remember some being like Hate It or Love It by 50 Cent featuring The Game. Absolutely stellar of a record. And The Gorillaz, Feel Good Inc. as well. 2005.
Also sick.
And yeah, after that, I really just got into playing guitar around the age of 11 and 12. A lot of my friends at the time as well, we had all listened to sort of indie rock, metal music. So that's where I kind of started. And I found as we got older, they would kind of stop playing guitar, but I continued with it. And that led me then to study music at sixth form, and eventually moved to Bristol and study at BIM with you guys. So that's really where I've came from. And yeah, I think at uni, that's where I sort of, my taste changed, and I leaned into genres like post and math rock, kind of expanded my musical horizons. It's a lot of the type of music I was making at that time. And yeah, I think after uni, I decided to stay in Bristol because it's a lovely city with an amazing music scene. And yeah, although I now have a very mundane job, I still try and make a lot of music when I'm not working. And yeah, that's kind of it.
That's how it's got to go. That's how it's got to go.
That's awesome. And again, the way that I knew you and your music taste was all of that post-rock, Dinosaur Jr., that field of music. And that's how I always, every time I listen to that, I'm like, it just reminds me of you. And I think your playing style is very indicative of that. But I like that the fact that you're really good at giving textures to your music. I think that's your strong point.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, a lot of influence from sort of the 90s, like Dinosaur Jr. and Billy Corgan's style of playing as well. So, yeah, that's where I come from. And I think as well, uni kind of taught me that I didn't want to be the best guitarist. That wasn't sort of the end goal, because you sort of meet a lot of people at uni who are virtuosos and really good at owning their craft. And that really wasn't for me. But yeah, I just made a load of good friends and played a lot of good music. So it was definitely worth it in the end, I think.
Yeah, it's great to hear. And what's like the projects that you're working on now? I know we've mentioned it in a couple of episodes, but like what's happening right now in terms of your music?
So at the moment I make music under at Loops and Landscapes. You can find me on Instagram there. So I just really do sort of 1 minute experiments and like work with a load of different things. I'm still sort of still owning my craft in terms of like mixing, and I'm learning a lot about that, but I'm trying to move away from just doing sort of 1 minute experiments and onto like a full release. So that'll be my next step, to release a group of tracks which I'm working on at the moment, and they're very sort of from that post-rock and also soundtrack inspired, because I love film soundtracks. So yeah, I'm just flowing with that really.
Awesome.
Sounds sick.
I honestly cannot wait to hear it. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, it sounds really cool, mate.
It's always good to... Yeah, it's always good when your friends release stuff. Yeah, I mean...
Yeah.
Don't know what else to say, really. That's a really good introduction. That's a really good kind of thing.
Yeah, I thought about something from my childhood a lot when I was thinking about what to talk on this podcast. And I think I was trying to think, what was the worst album I ever bought? And basically, it harkened back to a stage in my life when I was between sort of the ages of 11 and 14, and I'd go into sort of Virgin Megastore. Remember that? Great shop. And also HMV, and just sort of pick up albums from the sort of indie rock metal section that maybe from artists I'd never listened to, just sort of buy random albums with the pocket money I had. And for £4, I remember picking up Maximum Manson, which was the audiobook and unauthorized biography of Marilyn Manson. And I have no idea why I bought it. God. And it definitely was an ordeal listening to it. I think I only got around halfway through, but the main come away was the part where the narrator goes on to dispel the rumors that Marilyn Manson had surgery to remove his bottom rib, so he could self-pleasure himself.
Yeah, that's the classic. So he could look at his shoes from the back.
That's
definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, take away from what you will, listeners. But
so that would be your worst album that you've ever experienced.
Yeah, and I guess you can't really call it an album, because it's sort of more of a biography. It's just a narrated sort of audiobook type of deal, but it's definitely the worst, I guess, music that I ever spent money on, for sure. But
yeah, like you mentioned, we all met at uni. Jack and I lived in second year with one of your friends, and that was quite good. It was like an hour commute, like walk back to the uni. So again, as I'm so tired now from everything I'm doing, saving the world, a lot of 6 a.m. wake ups there. And then we all decided to move in together third year, and we were young, we were fun, weren't necessarily dumb though.
Well, some of us were
a lot of fights. Yeah, some of us were young. I was like in my late 60s at that point,
roughly that
golden age.
Yeah,
roughly that age. But a lot of wrestling. I remember Merritt and myself, for some weird reason, had a weird wrestling phase where you would just suddenly go, "Do you want to go for it, then, Marv?" And then we'd like. Then the whole infamy of like you breaking the sofa, which is obviously it was you.
Right, okay.
You keep going, "Oh no, it wasn't because you did this," and like Merritt definitely broke the sofa.
No, I did not. No, I did not.
I think I did. I remember as well this wrestling stage where it might have been the bed mattress that was put out in the front room, and I remember as well Bruno getting involved. But yeah, it wasn't really for me. I was more of a spectator at the time, but very interesting. And I mean, talking of household appliances that Merritt had broken, his own bed a few dozen times, the downstairs toilet countless occasions, the lock on my bedroom door, and maybe the 2 nights I spent outside sleeping on the front room couch because for some reason, Merritt, you'd locked my door with the key on the other side of it. But
always by accident.
Yeah,
I don't know how that happened. I'm still very, very what's the word? Empathetic towards you, considering the amount of times I did it to myself, and it wasn't a fun task because where we were renting, it would usually happen on a Saturday night. and the offices would be shut on a Sunday, which means no one could come back in the flat and let us in our room. Therefore, the amount of times I did it on a Saturday night and slept, that sofa knew my profile better than my beds by the end of that year, I think, because it
Beds.
Yeah, you got to add in the amount. No, it did, because I just kept doing it on a Saturday night. I don't know what it was. Some people think Saturday night's all right for fighting. I think it's all right for locking myself out of my room where our estate agent isn't available till the following Monday morning. Therefore, even then they'd be late and turn up when they said they wouldn't. Cheers, guys.
That is the longest, catchiest song title there, alternative song title you've just done then. I couldn't repeat it. It was very, very good.
I'll record a cover of that. I think that would be quite
You do a cover of that.
yes.
But I think one of my favourite things about the whole you breaking the bed story is one of them you said, I woke up and it was just broken.
True. Absolute fact.
True story. And I have to believe you.
What night terrors did you have that night? That's what I want to know.
It must have been pretty intense. It must have been pretty intense.
Crazy. But as well, I remember distinctly when we went to view the flat, we saw a property just 2 doors down, and it was an absolute asshole.
It was. Yeah, I remember that. Marv trusted us to find a flat. Yeah, I'll never forget that. All I remember of that is there was a mug on the mantelpiece with orange juice, and someone was like, yeah, that hadn't been moved for about 4 weeks or something.
It wasn't even a mug, it was a glass. That was the worrying
That was
thing.
a glass,
you could see the mold distinctly on the top layer of the orange juice.
There we go.
And I think
It
as
was
well,
basically crawling.
yeah, I think as well, one of the flatmates who was living there at the time came out like covered in their duvet, like, you know, when you wrap your duvet around yourself.
That's it.
And
yeah.
they were just like, I don't think they even knew that the flat viewing was happening. But yeah, I'm glad we didn't pick up that place and instead went with the flat.
Well, yeah, then we went to the viewing of the flat we actually went to, and we went into the lounger. So you go into our house. To the left was the downstairs toilet. You'd have Bruno and Merritt on the downstairs floor. You go up these like flat stairs that curve around, which Jack, I don't know anyone who runs downstairs faster than you who never has tripped or fallen over it. So quick. And then you'd have my room, Jack's room, the toilet facing you, our other roommate Scott's room, and then to the right of the toilet was the lounge. So we went in to view it. We go in. There's tarpaulin with dirt on it and a broken fridge which smelled like ham. No ham.
I remember that. Yeah.
And we went. We'll take it.
It was the tarpaulin I just didn't understand, because you say dirt, it was more like soil, and it was at least
like
2 foot high.
on.
Yeah, a 2 foot high pile of soil
With nothing in
and
it,
there were a
though.
load of students there at the time, and I think we just felt rude if we were going to ask what's this
Why
for?
have you got mud in your front room? Jack?
Yeah.
Is there something I'm missing out on here? Like, is it part of the vibe in the whole flat? I'm not sure, but
It was the fridge that smelled of ham, I think, which was sort of the worst feature of the place.
that solved it.
Which I think we kept, right? The mud went, the tarpaulin went, but we were like, this fridge is too dear to us. We have to keep it.
The fridge has got to stay.
Exactly. It was a Peep Show. It was Super Hands from Peep Show. No, that stays.
It was. Us two playing the game of hide the mouldy bread, which I detested because I'm so fussy with bread, and I'd look at my pillow and there'd be a big bit of mouldy bread, and then I could hear you downstairs going, "Tell you what, Marv." Things never change.
Or the time where you had all your CDs laid out, and Jack went, "I got a brilliant idea, Merritt. I got a brilliant idea," and he never had the minerals to pull it off, so old Mez had to do it, didn't he?
Oh, I totally forgot about that.
You were both drunk, mind. I'd gone away back home.
That's right.
And all my skate DVDs and stuff were on the top, and you were both drunk, and you decided to do what?
We basically opened every single CD and DVD case and switcherooved a lot of them. There wasn't a pattern.
That was the thing. We didn't want to make it obvious, so we didn't want you to open a skate video and find the Red Hot Chili Peppers Live and think, oh, well, if that's here, then surely in the Red Hot Chili Peppers Live DVD is the skate film I'm looking for. So it was definitely not an order made about it.
A continual trail of sweets, basically, that leads to nowhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? We went full Crystal Maze on your ass.
You did. And what was the reception?
You actually were all right with it, as I remember. You were just kind of like,
it was a little disappointing.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it built up a good rapport and relationship between us, and I just didn't care. I was too busy not getting enough sleep and trying to play tunes and, being tired. Because I'm tired right now, Mez, all right?
There's one other story I do want to get to, and I think it'd be a criminal if we left it in, and it is James Merritt coming back from a hard day's craft, wherever he was doing, to come into his bedroom and find the whole bedroom had been cleaned, and his washing had been put in the washing machine and was on. And if you want to take over from there, Marvin, say.
I will. So Merritt was, by all accounts, I would say, a very messy roommate.
Yes.
I love him dearly, but that's such a bad side of you.
Yeah.
And especially at that time in your life, like being quite young, 2021, and just, being away from home and whatnot. Yeah, it's tough and all that. And it's your own room. But, especially when you throw in the student thing of people not wanting to do their own washing up, then it gets to the point of, I'm not going to do any washing up. And we go into your room and there'd be, similar to the eerie story you just said before about the first flat, orange juice glasses with mold and all the plates and all the forks. We just all started getting really annoyed. So we had a maintenance man who we'd ring up and he'd come over and sort stuff out. So I remember Scott and I went into your room and we were like, oh my God, it's a shithole. Oh my God. And we were like, right, screw this. Let's just clean it. So we got all your clothes that some even were still in the Primark bags that you bought them in, all the hangers, put everything out that was dry, checked everything in the wash, cleaned your whole room out, get all the plates, all the things, so everything was just done, like a nice reset button. And we said, right, what we'll do is we'll tell Merritt, the maintenance guy, who was like a 55, 57-year-old version of you, basically, in the future, Mez. We said he needed to come in and paint the ceiling, but he couldn't get his ladder there, so he had to clean up. So we're saying he did it. Bearing in mind, we spoke, I think we had one conversation when we were talking about his son, and he was doing loads of coke or something, or doing loads of drugs.
Lived in London and did loads of drugs and stuff like that.
It was the 80s then.
So
different era.
There you go, different era, different times, different drugs for different needs. So we were all upstairs, and we heard you come in. And then it's like, it's like, hey, what? Hey, like a wild animal, like just sensing there's a trap somewhere. And you come upstairs, you go dung, 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 and we knew when you. And the thing with you is, like Jack when he used to run downstairs, and you didn't know he would be like next to you. We knew, like when you opened the door, it was like you punched it or kicked it. It was like so like violent. I mean, you just be stood there. So you were like, "What's going on in my room? I don't know what's going on in my room. Just been bloody clean, what's all that stuff?" And they're like, yeah, the maintenance guy to come in. You felt really, really bad. You're like, oh my God, I don't understand it. So you go all the way back down. I think you must have gone to get some food. And then we hear, what? He's done the washing up as well? Because you were so flabbergasted that he'd done your clothes washing. All the way back upstairs, boot the door down. I can't believe it, boys. He's even put my clothes in the wash. I don't know what's going on. You were so like, half annoyed at him, but like half happy that like that had been done. You didn't have to do it. And then for the next half an hour, 40 minutes, we're all trying not to piss ourselves laughing, looking at each other, everything you said being like, but you're just there like, boys, I just can't get it. I just don't get why you do that. And then eventually it was just like, couldn't hold it any longer.
The most confused I'd ever seen you, honestly.
Yeah,
I was
so good.
I was confused. I was worried that the maintenance man found an excuse. He was like some sort of deviant, and he had been eyeing up my underwear for a while or something, and I was concerned that he'd finally found an excuse to steal some. Because let's be honest, I don't exactly take inventory of my clothes. So
no, to put it lightly.
To put it very, very lightly, not to put a too fine point to it. Yeah, I was really worried that this creepy dude had just been like, yep, we'll have some of them. Oh, yep, they've been warm for a few days. You know what I mean? I was really concerned. That was my thought process.
Like some garments would have been missing, or
he's buttering me up. He's buttering me up for something. But no.
What, literally?
Yeah, he could have been. But no, I was so impressed by the magnitude of that prank. So impressed. Like,
you had to
props.
Respect it. So, maintenance guy, wherever you are, whoever you are, wherever you may be, if you do have a kind of fetish for James Merritt's undergarments, briefs, trousers, shoes, socks, hats, beard hair, anything,
seek
become
help.
a Patreon. seek help first. No, actually, no. Seek help afterwards. But first, go on our Patreon, 50 Ways Podcast. We'll make a specific special tier for you, my friend. And we'll think of something. Mary, I reckon maybe the Mokiki the Bear onesie. That was your alter ego with the onomatopoeic words.
Yep.
Oh no,
that was
That
good.
stuff like
Or the Hawaiian briefs. I think they're the two items of clothing that I would associate you with, and they could go. We'll put. What do you reckon's a fair price for our tier?
50 yeah,
50 quid?
I was going to say 50 quid.
50 quid.
Yeah?
Yeah, but I'm taking
You're good
all
with
of the
that?
profit on that, by the way.
Okay. Well, we're exploiting you for our greed.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Okay. Lovely. But yeah, like we said, we could go on forever and ever and ever with talking about our uni days, and maybe we could, but we're here to talk about albums. We're here to talk about music. We're here to talk about all the good, all the bad, all the ugly, all the lovely stuff.
Organised vibrations.
Organised vibrations. I like that natural noise that's around us, collected into some sort of, art or product.
Yes.
I listened to the Crazy Frog album, James Merritt, that you reviewed last week.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed that you got through it.
Oh, it was a breeze. Honestly, I found it very easy to get along with.
Well, that is the problems with me then, not the album.
Well, again, put it this way, like it didn't offend me because I think I didn't know anything about it really, and you gave me so much good context, and the fact that I was like, this is coming, even if you viewed it as like a posthumous album in the sense that he's only got, the Crazy Frog himself, he's only got a finite amount of lines or sounds, right?
Yeah.
As proven on a cappella sounds, right? So to manage to get like, how many tracks was it? 14, 15?
Something like that, yeah.
To manage to bang out 15 tracks, some of them, like most of them that are covers, I'm like, that's pretty insane in itself that you managed to stretch that far. That came from a guy imitating a motorcycle sound that was meant to be a ringtone. It's not even something that was meant to be his forte. And I'm thinking, well, it's kind of cohesive. It stays on brand. And, I was dancing along and jumping around and messing around to Axel F and Popcorn. And I think I just kind of got used to the sounds of the old Crazy Frog. I think he's doing well. I hope he does put out a final album. I wonder what he's got. So yeah, Mez, I'm all for it, mate. I'm all for it, mate. I'm putting it on again. But I want to know what you thought about We Are the Champions, Ding a Dang Dong?
Ding a dang dong.
Ding a Dang Dong. Tell me your thoughts, boy.
So it's a complete re-recording. A complete re-recording. It's obviously not to the same structure of the original Queen Stone Cold Steve Austin classic. But again, it's just more of the sort of same. However, I was impressed to find that there were a few new things included. So obviously with a lot of that album, he like hums the melody in his own sort of quirky frog voice. But he didn't reveal that until the very end. And there's a rap verse.
From what? From the Crazy?
Not from
the
no.
No.
It's a human
Mez.
voice. I mean, I technically class all Crazy Frog as rap verses because he's not necessarily singing in a lot of these.
He's more of a hype man, I'd say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good point,
yeah.
actually. Like Bez.
Yeah.
Jack, what did you take from Crazy Frog?
So yeah, I thought it'd be only fair in the podcast tradition to subject myself to these albums as discussed in last week's episode as well. Yeah, well, definitely in this case, I find so with the Crazy Frog's Crazy Hits. My main question was just, who is it for? Because I think you have sort of Axel F's Beverly Cobb's theme and the Popcorn, which are instantly recognizable, I feel like, for all ages and audiences. So I think those tracks work really well. But then the rest of the track listing's bizarre because they're sort of remixes or covers, as you'd say, but I'd use that term loosely because a lot of it sounds like almost the original stems from the tracks themselves. With these sort of ad-lib moments. And a lot of the tracks are late 80s and early 90s dance hits, like Get Ready for This, Don't You Want Me, not the Human League, sadly, Pump Up the Jam, and Whoop, There It Is. And it just feels like it is just the Crazy Frog's ad-libs on top of these tracks. And I'd feel like I'd much rather listen to the original tracks than like an extra one or two synth lines that Crazy Frog stuck on there, and then the odd ring ding ding or bing or what. You did a better impression.
Anything else? I'm not doing it again.
So yeah, like it was funny you mentioned the Crazy Frog's genitalia as well last week, because I noticed this is on that album as well on the front cover.
Yeah.
Unpixelated, sadly, and
He's
yeah,
out
it's
there.
just I just don't understand it. I found as well, looking at the album cover, there's a little thing which mentions it comes with 2 music videos, 2 crazy games, a screensaver, wallpaper, and photos, which made me feel like very 2005. Because
Yeah.
when you were that age,
Enhanced CD.
yeah, the most important things were sort of your wallpaper and screensaver on your family PC. So that made me chuckle a bit. While you're downloading Linkin Park's Numb on your LimeWire.
Yeah. Did you listen to anything else?
Yeah, well, I checked out the other album as well. If you want to discuss that, I think Merritt had to listen to a Lost for Words Motown classic. So
I did listen to that. Yes.
And what were your thoughts?
Cool.
So I don't really have anything more to bring to the table other than what Marv said last week. I did not hate I Want You Back as much as I thought I would. I was actually okay with it. It was all right. But to me, it's very, I think you may have described it this way. It's very throwaway. Very throwaway. It's very like, oh, that exists. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no real like, I'm definitely going to return to that. It's just a bit of a like, this is kind of fun, I suppose. And like you mentioned last week, it quite possibly bridged the gap and opened the door for more pop punk bands to then, unironically or ironically, however you want to look at it, cover popular pop songs. I've just said cover popular songs, by the way.
You're a wordsmith. This is why I decided to, team up with you to do this thing.
Exactly.
My friend Sam Walton, who's a regular listener, he said that Newfound Glory, I think, had done an album of covers. And again, because I've been super busy and super tired and everything, sorry everyone. I haven't actually checked it out, but I'm going to assume that they're not any songs from like this era.
I think they
that have tried to accomplish this.
I think they did a cover of Kiss Me. I'm probably wrong on this account, but and that kind of works. And again, with the whole covering like pop or in this instance sort of soul and Motown tracks, it's just I can appreciate where the inspiration comes from with this album, and like that heart was in the right place, and it's sort of going along with that pop goes punk era, and that actually began in 2002 with that first pop goes punk album, and then it didn't actually get followed up until like 2009. I saw with Pop Goes Punk Volume or Punk Goes Pop Volume 2, and so that's like the same year this album came out. But I feel like with the songs on that album, the problem is with modern pop songs is they lend themselves really easily to sort of punk and alt rock genre crossovers and covers, sort of with the like simple melodies, and you can just like make the instruments heavier. It just works a lot better. And I feel like with a lot of the tracks on this album, especially like the drums on All Night Long or the brass on I Want You Back, is sort of it's like essential to the track itself, and I feel like that's lost when you just replace it with a distorted guitar. And I feel like it just doesn't work as well, and that's the reasons for it. But I can see where you're coming from when you mentioned Can't Hurry Love. Like that actually works quite well. Especially with the sort of pop punk, just like faster drum beats. So but there was just no charm with it.
Yeah, it's kind of devoid of passion in a weird sense, even though it was done with like all sincerity. It just came across as just very undynamic and just lifeless.
That's kind of the way I thought about it. The same way as the Aussie album I did. There's no real depth. There's no real creative change. They've literally just, like we mentioned, I'll start again. Like we've mentioned before, they've just gone and learned the songs. There's no real like, oh, I've got this cool bit in place of this cool bit. I'm going to cough.
Love that. Good strong cough.
Excuse me. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. It's nothing I'm going to be led on my deathbed saying to my loving partner, like, oh, please play this as I get pushed in, as I get carried in. Please play. But
and I will go as your loving partner. Yeah. I'll be like, no, Mez, it has to be Iron Maiden, The Trooper.
Oh yeah,
it got you into BIM. It got you out of BIM.
Yeah.
It is you.
It's me.
And I'd hand you that show. I'd hand you your first ever guitar, and with every ounce of strength in your 2 remaining fingers that you've got left, one on one hand, one on the other hand, you'd play that riff, and you play that riff, and you give me one final cough and one final drag on that cigarette until the sweet, sweet release of death.
My dying moment, ladies and gentlemen. If that happens, I will be impressed.
Yeah, so again, all very good. We'll probably give ourselves albums to listen to, and we've kind of gone through this episode, but we are going to be looking at today albums that follow the band or artist's kind of biggest album. Now, that can be critically, that can be commercially, or it can be both at the same time. Now, how the hell do you follow up your biggest achievement, the thing that people are going to hang their hat on with you and go, what do they sound like? Listen to that album. Listen to that album. It could be a second one, it could be a first one, it could be anything, it could be your latest one. You know, you could have a whole body of work before. You could not have a whole body of work before. I think maybe the question, the statement there, or the answer is like, depends how big the album is in the respective field of critical or commercial. So maybe that's, again, a blessing or a curse. My pick comes from an artist that was like, is in the very big best-selling artists of all time category. And I think the album that I will talk about will definitely show that. I'm not too sure about you two guys, but, you know, it's like, where do you kind of go? So, like, your choices could be that you kind of do the same thing as the album before and kind of let them live in the same kind of universe. But then that kind of gives you the risk of, like, diluting the formula, diluting the appeal and the impact of what you kind of did. And for me personally, I don't actually like that. I like to see a risk afterwards, because you kind of earn the reward to do that, so to speak. You could do something completely different, but then you kind of risk alienating new fans, even alienating existing fans. And if you're on a major label and you've got other people working for you, you're kind of letting them down, or they're kind of going, yeah, he's a flash in the pan. Yeah, you know, you only had that one in you. I told you shouldn't have done that. Or you kind of relax and either take 5, 6, 7 years to put out something else, craft it really well, or you could just never release anything again and retire. So, you know, Jay-Z did the Black Album and he was like, I'm going to retire. Maybe I don't know if commercially that's his biggest selling album, but I would say as a general public, people would go to the Black Album to listen to Jay-Z. I'd say his first record is his most critical acclaimed album, but even he couldn't like stay out of retirement, you know? So he kind of came back with Kingdom Come, which I believe is one of his weakest pieces of work. It's also got the Nas diss on that, Merritt, for you. So I'd definitely go listen to that. Merritt, let's hear yours. What have you gone for album that follows up a very, very good critically or commercially acclaimed album?
So I had a lot of options. I struggled to find some sales figures for some of the bands I wanted to talk about. I mean, I could talk to them as well. That'd be good.
Sit down with a coffee.
Maiden, if you're about, boys, come down for a coffee. There's 3 of us now. There's 6 of you. In a couple of months, that'll be legal. Come down for a coffee. None of you are silly gooses, all right? So, I went the most obvious route I possibly could have. And I only realised this when I was finishing off my notes. The album I picked was Yellow Submarine by the Beatles. I picked this because my love for the Beatles is a really, really, really weird one. There's never any like huge growth and then I won't listen to them for 6 months, which I'm like with a lot of bands. My love for the Beatles just seems to continuously expand. And I love listening to them. And the other week before we'd even discussed this subject, I was listening to the White Album in full anyway, so I was like, that kind of goes back. That's really cool. So yes, I picked Yellow Submarine, and also because I know Marv is a massive Beatles nerd, and anything he doesn't know about the Beatles is not worth knowing. And he's even got a little Beatles mug right there.
I'm even drinking out of a Beatles mug.
Look at that. And do you know what's funny, Marv? Do you know what's quite funny, mate? So have I, kid.
Oh, is that a mug? Is that a glass in a mug?
That's a glass in a mug, kid, yeah.
Oh, I bet it's got orange juice in it. A bit of mould.
Oh, what have you got there? Captain Planet. I respect that.
It's not the Beatles, but...
Yeah, fair enough. Not the Beatles,
I'll take Captain Planet. Yeah. So as I'm sure you two know, I don't know about our listeners, but Yellow Submarine was recorded for the film. As in, the album was recorded for the film. Now, the song had already appeared on Revolver. Is that right? Yes, it already appeared.
Revolver, indeed. Track 6, I believe.
Nerd. And the other song had already previously been released as a single. Was All You Need Is Love. So, a stone cold classic. All You Need Is Love. Yellow Submarine is charming, but it's not one of my fondest Beatle moments. That echoes a lot of people's opinions, as in the song, not the album. We'll get into the meat and bones of the album now. So, it was released. This confuses me a bit, and I don't know why this is the case. You could probably answer that question, Marv. It was released.
I'll back you up, boy.
It was released on the 13th of January, 1969 in the US. And in the UK, it was released 4 days after, on the 17th of January. Some intermission there.
That was a massive motorbike going past my house there, but it was very apt that it kind of stopped after your thing there. I don't know why it was released necessarily on different days, US or UK. It probably just because of the way the marketing works.
More than likely, yeah. Obviously put out on Apple, of course. And a runtime of 39 minutes, 69 seconds. I like mentioning these things, listeners. It gives me a comfort. It gives me a happiness because now I can get into the meat and bones. So,
Nerd.
The album before was obviously an album that needs absolutely no introduction. Classic. It is the White Album. It is the White Album. It is the tippy top. Incredible. Absolutely mind-blowing. I adore this album.
Very, very good.
I adore this. It's one of those albums, well, I think this of most Beatles albums anyway, but it's one of those albums that everybody needs to listen to at least once. And if you're a musician, you get an education. It's just amazing. It's fantastic. So yes, this album, Yellow Submarine, it was a contractual obligation. It was obviously recording some new songs for the film that were written and recorded for that purpose exclusively. And yeah, it's not remembered fondly by a lot of people. And I don't think that is because it's a bad album. In fact, the running theme tends to be it is not at the magnitude of the Beatles' usual recording and releasing standard. Even the band don't see it as a significant release, or they never did. In places so it's got two sides. Side 1 is the Beatles, and side 2 is George Martin's arrangements of orchestral bits and bobs, which include sort of pieces from his previous work with the Beatles, which is nice. It is pleasant to listen to. It is all right. You know, you can tell that it is for a film. It's obviously scored. They're not. To my mind, they are obviously standalone pieces of music, but I don't view them as that. You can hear it's for a film. Recorded before the White Album and released 2 months after it, so is obviously going to be overshadowed anyway because the White Album is enormous, and it was enormous. It reached the top 5 in the US and the UK because, of course, it's the Beatles. It doesn't matter what it is. It's going to sell like hotcakes. But yeah, most of the reviews I've read, people seem to think it falls short of most of their work. Yes. Yellow Submarine as a single was released in August 1966. It topped the UK album charts for 4 weeks. And obviously it's also on Revolver, as we've already mentioned. And All You Need Is Love was also released as a single in July 1967. As I said, I consider it maybe a bit bland in places. It may be a bit of a trim the fat sort of deal. Because obviously, as we've mentioned, some of the songs were actually written for the film purpose. So I'm going to give you an extract, and I'm not going to tell you where it's from. I'm just going to give you an extract because I found it and I agree with it. And it reads, of the 6 tracks by the Beatles on the album's first side, Yellow Submarine, and All You Need Is Love are already familiar from their original contexts as part of Revolver and as a single, respectively. The other 4 were holdovers from sessions in 1967, Paul McCartney's All Together Now, which is charming. It's I almost put it in that same category as Queen's sort of Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon or Bring Back That Leroy Brown. They're like pub songs. They're like chanty sort of football anthems. Do you know what I mean? You've got Harrison's It's All Too Much and It's Only a Northern Song. And then you've also got John Lennon's Hey Bulldog. Yeah, they never found release during the time they were recorded because apparently they weren't good enough. I've got some quotes, which are lovely. I never knew this. I never knew this about Paul. In his own words, I love cartoons. I love the Disney stuff. So, you know, the first thing we heard people were going to do a cartoon, I just thought, yeah, this could be the greatest Disney cartoon ever. I mean, with our music. But they were going more sort of Sgt. Pepper direction. So we said, well, why don't you just take a lot of songs we've already got? I like the thought process because, let's be honest, by that point, they already had quite a staggering back catalogue. So, plenty to take from. And George said, the animation was tailored to the music and the feelings that we're about. We had a bunch of songs that we were working on that hadn't been heard before the film. So, Marv, I want to know what you think of this album. If there's no... Imagine there's no Yellow Submarine film, and I want to hear your opinion on this album.
Okay, so viewing it as just the next Beatles album. I do remember getting this, I think when they might have reissued stuff, maybe around 2011, 2010. And I want to say I've listened to the whole thing once, but I only went there as a collector, as a purist, so I could have these songs on the respective albums that they're on rather than the compilation. But I quite like it. Obviously, Yellow Submarine, I really like that song. I adore it. I think it's really, really good. It's really simple and childlike. I know that Only a Northern Song was meant to be on Sgt. Pepper. That was the thing that George Harrison did.
Okay.
And it's almost like a diss track to his record label because he's like, I don't want to write another song. He didn't want to write anything more around Sgt. Pepper's, to be honest with you. So he kind of just did Only a Northern Song, and it's kind of like not unlikable, but it's a lot to kind of get through. Same as It's All Too Much. It's quite like an LSD dirge, and with It's All Too Much, when he's like, you know, you might think the chords are going wrong, and he plays a weird chord, and it's very on the nose, very George Harrison, which reflects the way he was feeling. I mean, he wanted to quit the Beatles after they stopped touring. He was very disinterested. Disinterested? Yeah, disinterested. That's the one. Altogether Now, you're right. I think it was used in football chants. I think it actually was used in football grounds. I like that it speeds up. I like that it's pretty funny.
I like that.
It's very Beatles, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very Beatles sounding, yeah. And Hey Bulldog, I think, is the best track out of them lot, including Yellow Submarine. I'd say that's the best one. All You Need Is Love is great. Maybe like not their strongest single they've ever done. But Hey Bulldog, just for the fact of, this was Lennon getting back. This is him getting back out of his LSD drug period and back into kind of bluesy, pentatonic rock. And the riff is really, really good. It's got a John Lennon solo, which is like gold. And he's so good at doing like sounds improvised, but like kind of is structured and is raw and is somewhat a little bit fiddly and hard to replicate, which Harrison has a different thing. Like, you can replicate Harrison, but tonally or things like that is a bit harder. Whereas Lennon, it's like the actual playing style is quite hard to kind of mimic. But yeah, apart from that, like the orchestral film score is like, I just respect it for what it is, but I never sit back and chuck any of them on without knowing what the film is. I think if you just think of the first 6 tracks, I think it's a good album, but maybe in the sense that Stevie Wonder had a album called The Secret Life of Plants, which came after Songs in the Key of Life. I think it was 5 years after that. and it was hyped as the next Stevie Wonder album, the next Stevie Wonder album. But it was actually a soundtrack to a TV show or a film or documentary, something like that. So maybe in the same vein that has studio tracks in and out of it, but it also has really weird experimental songs that my mum especially was very disappointed when she got that, because she felt like she got, what's the word? Like kind of conned out of it. They said it was one thing and it was actually another thing. I think it's good, but I think you can live without these songs until you've listened to every single album as a whole, and then you want to dig a little bit deeper. Their B-sides are glorious, and you could view it maybe as like a B-sides kind of album.
Yeah.
And like a hybrid soundtrack studio album. But yes, definitely I don't view it as in their line of their studio albums.
Yeah.
It's like a left turn, like a tangent.
I can understand that. Jack, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. In the same sort of vein as Martin was saying, and I think these songs do work really well within the context of the film. And like you said, with the "It's All Too Much" and like mentioning all the chords are going wrong, it's very childlike and sort of plays into that narrative or narrative. But yeah, it just doesn't seem like a Beatles album as a whole. Very much like you said, a left turn. And like you said, the best songs on there, I think, as well, are Hey Bulldog, Yellow Submarine, and All You Need Is Love. And you can just sort of disregard the other ones and such, I think. And that's how I feel about it, really. It's not an album by the Beatles that I've listened to a lot, and I think that's why, maybe just because of its runtime and the fact it doesn't feel like a cohesive thing, like it's been written from start to finish. Like you mentioned, the Yellow Submarine and All You Need Is Love, they were written already and pre-released on other albums. So yeah, it doesn't really work as a concluding thing. And the side 2 with the orchestral film score, you can just take that for what it is. And as well, works really nicely within the context of the film if you've seen that. But other than that, it's not something I'm always going back to.
No, I understand that, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get to, because obviously even the band weren't that hyped on it. Even the band, and I'm never ever going to rag on the Beatles, never. But there are in places a sort of, all right, boys, let's get this done. But when you think about it, if you've just released an album like the self-titled, you're going to have that sort of attitude about it, aren't you? Because I can imagine at the time they were probably really, really proud of the body of work they produced on the White Album. I would be. Like, they must have been. So I can kind of understand and get the context with the sort of, all right, boys, let's get through this, let's get this done. But yeah, it was never intended as a high-profile release. And it was issued when the Beatles were still number one. In fact, I think we've all spoken about this in turn. It's known these days, as we've named it, the Ed Sheeran effect, where Ed Sheeran released an album like last year before. I don't think it was Divide, or maybe it was Divide. But the first 7 songs were the 7 songs off his album in the top 10, and the other 3 were songs he'd written for other people. That's unobtainable success. I think they probably view it as we've spoken about before, as kind of like it was a moment in time, it was a contractual obligation. It's not terrible, like not in a million years. I actually really enjoyed listening to it. But when you compare it to the big guns, it doesn't stand up, not in comparison. That's my take anyway. That's what I think of it.
Especially when you have the White Album, which is the longest body of work they've done to that point, to then go to Yellow Submarine, which you could view as their shortest body of work if you look at the first side, about 21 minutes. That's a shock because you feel like you're not going to get bang for your buck. They did the Magical Mystery Tour album, which to me, I put that in the category of as one of their studio albums. And that's got, I think that has Strawberry Fields on it. And I think that has All You Need Is Love on it as well. And I view that as it's like a prototype version of Yellow Submarine, like a shorter EP version. And you think about the breadth of music and diversity of music on the White Album. It goes from like proto heavy metal in like Helter Skelter to Good Night, which is all orchestral and and lovely and lush, Yellow Submarine's kind of following in that trend. But when you're the Beatles and everything you do touches to gold and you can't do anything wrong, I think their first missteps really were the Magical Mystery Tour film, and it was in black and white when it came out, and a lot of people were like, I'm not too sure about this. And then I guess you could view Let It Be, and not necessarily Abbey Road, but Let It Be as maybe like a misstep necessarily. But yes, I still wouldn't think Yellow Submarine is their worst record. I think Beatles for Sale would be their weakest record. But yeah, they were just doing what their record company told them. And I don't think they really cared. I don't think they paid it much mind. No. They weren't going to make that Yellow Submarine album and go, this has to be the best thing. They were like, let's just do it. We're all good. We just purged out all these songs. We ain't worrying about it,
Yeah,
exactly.
I quite agree.
I was going to say, I think it's probably a blessing for them that it was released those 2 months after the White Album or the Beatles.
Yeah.
Because, it can just get lost to time, basically. And obviously, like I mentioned, you've got the film, which is kind of the whole production in itself with the orchestral score as well. But yeah, like the fact it can just get lost, and people obviously still remember the standout hits, like All You Need Is Love, which is a banger. So
there you go. Absolutely. I quite agree with you. Bit of a task for the old boys now.
Go on.
Favourite song off the White Album?
Back in the USSR.
That is.
Straight in.
Oh. Well, I'm gonna go track 2, Dear Prudence.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna go with the one that I'm currently really, really enjoying, which is Your Blues.
With the album as well, it's almost like you look at the songs on there and there's so many hits. It's unreal. Like, obviously, the album itself is 4 sides, so it's as many hits as you can cram on it. But honestly, like, Blackbird is on there, Obla D, How Skelter, it's crazy, Revolution 1, like, they're all so many good tracks. Like,
anyway, so overall, I enjoyed it. I didn't find it offensive. It's certainly not to the brow of usual Beatles standards, but it wasn't meant to be. So I think I've taken that album exactly how I'm supposed to, in view of the artist. And I haven't watched the film, but I probably should go and watch it, shouldn't I?
I think it's quite enjoyable. It's quite enjoyable. Go into it with like a childlike mind. It was very, very popular with children, even now. I could lend you the DVD if you want. That's a bit of old media.
Oh, I'd love that.
Instead of streaming it, I'll give you the DVD. But yeah, I'd say it's a good watch. Actually, all of their films are a very good watch. Very interesting. Quite good actors, I would say.
Yeah.
As a whole.
Yeah, just good at everything. Yeah. Good lads.
Good little lads. They did
lads.
A couple of big.
Paul, come round. I'll brew you up a coffee, son. We'll have a chat about it. All right.
Yes.
Do you know, the sort of bloke he was. He is. He was. He's still here. The sort of bloke he is. If I spoke with him, I bet he would. I bet he'd come round, have a coffee. We'd jam for a couple of hours. He'd go, James, you're so much better at writing than I am. How have I got this success and you haven't? And he'd call me a silly goose.
I'd let Paul McCartney call me a silly goose.
I'd let Paul McCartney call me anything he wanted.
Okay, and if you want to vote on what you think Paul McCartney should call James Merritt, James Mez Merritt, James Christopher Albert George Meredith Lee Fairweather California Merritt, I think that's his full proper actual name, then yeah, let us know in the comments, DM us, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of that stuff. You know what I'm talking about. 50 Ways Podcast, 50 Ways Podcast, Patreon, £3. You can get a nice, big, old, uncut episode with me truly, you, James Merritt truly, and Jack Sharp truly.
Truly.
And he is a Patreon, so he's going to get it too, and he's going to love it. We're all going to love it.
It's definitely worth it.
Jack, it's definitely worth it, see? And we didn't even force him to say that.
Yeah, that's it. I'm not holding anything to his head as a threat.
No. And I'm hovering over the, quit his window thing, because he knows that he should abide by what we say. And now I'm going to force him to say his pick. So, Jack, please take it away. What did you go with?
Yeah, so when you came to me with this and this sort of idea of an album after like a very successful, critically acclaimed follow-up, this was the one I ultimately think of, and I think as well it's kind of been lost to time, but it is the Kings of Leon album, Come Around Sundown. I think before I get into that album, it's important to talk about what was previous to it, and I think that's where in which the problem lies with this album. But I mean, to give a bit of background of the Kings of Leon themselves, they formed in 1999, and they're brothers. So the three of them, Caleb, Nathan, and Gerard Followill, they're brothers, and their cousins also in the band. Who's the guitarist? He's Matthew Followill. And their first album came out in 2003, Youth, Young, and Manhood, and it's a very bluesy rock inspired album, I'd say. Kind of with their roots coming from sort of Southern America, so you can hear that influence. Following that, only a year later, they had Aha, Shake, Heartbreak. And I think this album sort of is a bit more nuanced than its writing. It's definitely a softer approach. I don't know if you've heard it, but songs like Milk and Dale Blues, they're sort of peppered in along the big indie hits with the hooky choruses like The Bucket and Pistol of Fire. So, yeah. And then I think this is sort of where they changed their sound, but we transitioned to 2007s because of the times. And we can talk about why their sound changed, and we'll probably get onto that later. But I think the standout tracks from it are the singles themselves, Charmer and Encore. Uncool. And they're definitely a bit more full and thicker sounding. And by this point as well, I think they'd created a following for themselves around the world. This is the point where I started listening to them, thanks to a website called play.com, which I don't know if you boys will remember, but it's where
I remember Play.
I remember play.com.
Exactly, and it's where I bought a CD of that because of the times it was on offer. So I thought, why not? And at the time, I was listening to a lot of UK and US indie acts like Block Party and The Strokes. So it made sense to check them out, and that's where I kind of fell in love with them. And I still think their second album, Aha, Shake, Heartbreak, that's sort of I think probably the best thing they've made to date, and it's my favourite. But we move on to, of course, Only by the Night, which is their best-selling album, released in September of 2008. And I think I listened to an interview with Zane Lowe from 2008 where Nathan said, "This isn't your typical 2.5-minute barn burner songs." And I think that's a good reflection on what the album is as a whole. If we look at just the sort of success it did, it went 10 times platinum in the UK and Australia, platinum multiple times in many other European countries such as Germany, Belgium, Austria. Sold up at 2 million copies in the States. It was very well received by critics. Within the US, like Billboard gave it a 70 out of 10, and Entertainment Weekly an 83 out of 10. UK publications equally given it favourable ratings, like The Enemy 7 out of 10, and Q Magazine an 8 out of 10. And I think as well there was a lot of buzz surrounding them at the time with the lead single, of course, Sex on Fire, which only came out 2 weeks before the album on September the 5th. And it quickly became UK number 1 and stayed in the charts for about 42 weeks. And only then it was kind of came out of the charts because Michael Jackson had died, and there was a lot of resurgence of people buying his music. So that's sort of the reason why they got kicked out of the charts. But a fun fact, I mean, with Sex on Fire itself, is the chorus or the hook is actually a joke by Caleb, just singing over the chorus, "Your sex is on fire," and the band actually really liked it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, no, definitely keep that on there." So that's why it's there basically. And I mean, Jared later said in an interview that it was the first time the band and the record company had agreed on what track was going to be the single, which I thought was quite interesting. So yeah, and again, other notable singles. The follow-up to that one, "You Somebody," and again, this stayed in the UK charts for over 40 weeks and became just such a massive hit. And yeah, I feel like as well at this time, 2008, you couldn't go anywhere without hearing these songs. And I know, Martin, previously you've talked about the sort of Chelsea Dagger syndrome, where maybe you overhear a song,
Indeed.
overplay it, and people chant it all the time. And I feel like with Sex on Fire, it definitely comes under that category. And you hear it shout at weddings and things like that. But yeah, do you guys have any opinions on that album, Only by the Night? What are your thoughts?
I remember it coming out. I think I jumped on the Kings of Leon train's second album. Four Kicks was when I kind of got into Kings of Leon properly. I really, really liked it. It was like the garage rock revival that I kind of missed. And then the Black Keys kind of helped solidify that for me. So I also think that their second record is their best one, maybe critically, where they sounded. And I liked because of the times. I thought it was a nice logical next step. And again, they started touring with U2, and they realized that their first two albums didn't really hit out on the stadiums. So they started messing around with stuff in Soundcheck, which is why the drums are bigger, the reverb's bigger. Maybe the riffs are simpler, but maybe more impactful. But then I remember Only by the Night coming out, and I hated it. I hated Sex on Fire. I still don't like the song very much now. I can appreciate that it's a very well-written pop song. But at the time, I was like, they have sold out. How rubbish, how bad, so poppy. What are they doing? Now, with 13 years of hindsight, and you look back and it's a band playing real instruments, and it's still rock music, what a silly thing to think of. But obviously then at that time, rock was still very, very prevalent. But yeah, I really was not a fan. And I think I even waited till... It might have even been till Come Around Sundown came out. I was like, right, let me go back and listen to this Only by the Night. And yeah, it's a stellar record. It's brilliant. It's great. Mez, thoughts, please.
So in 2008, I was 14 years old, and the only band in the world that existed to me were Status Quo. So I remember this album being advertised like mad. I remember the adverts. I remember the constant marketing just dirge. It was going on and on and on. I really like Sex on Fire, and I have never, ever had a time where I haven't liked it.
Nerd.
I think it is a fantastic song. I think it's really, really well constructed. And, yeah, catchy hook. A really nice sort of build-up to the choruses. I'm really into it. I think it's really, really cool. Completely not my band, but really, really cool. Now, usually with this sort of song, I can't stand it if it's been overplayed, because I've heard it. I know what it sounds like now, I'm going to go listen to something else. And that's actually the reason why I can't stand Rolling in the Deep, because I was working at a garage for for work experience at the time, and every other song was either Paparazzi by Lady Gaga,
banger,
or Rolling in the Deep by Adele. Paparazzi I'm okay with now. Rolling in the Deep I still can't come to grips with. But
the scars are too deep.
Yeah, they are, mate. They are. I wake up screaming every time I hear the ding, 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 ding. I'm like, no.
It's almost like you want to push your fingers into your...
Nice little in-joke there.
An in-joke that only Jack will get, and we're going to be annoying and not explain it.
No, go on. I'm happy to do that. There's a picture that one of my relatives put up on Facebook of me with a cheekiest grin on my face, being a 10-year-old, wearing a Slipknot shirt. I'm not ashamed of that. But
no, it's just
we've all got past.
It's the juxtaposition, because I remember sending it to the group Facebook chat. Other social media outlets are available.
Yeah.
And just with the, I push my fingers into my... Yeah, great.
It's the duality of it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, he's done you again there, mate. I didn't even see that.
Sewed me up like a kipper there, kid. But no, the songs I've heard from this album, really impressed with them. I think they're great. I think they're really well written. I really want to talk about the other songs that you're going to get to, so I'm going to shut up now and let you carry on, Mr. Sharp.
Obviously, following this album, the band were doing sort of the biggest tours they'd ever done. They did a 29-date Canadian-US tour for the album's release, and then a 12-date UK tour, which included arenas like O2 and the Manchester Evening News. And that year as well, they headlined Reading and Leeds Festival, 2009. So it was clearly a massive success to them. And like you said, Martin, with the fact that now their songs were sounding bigger than ever, they could actually bring them to these stages and these arenas, and it would work in that context. Obviously, moving on now to Come Around Sundown, which was the album I listened to or went back to. And it came out in October of 2010. And I think it's a good album, or at least an okay one. It just carries a lot of filler, I feel. And I think critically and commercially, it sits too much in the shadow of Only by the Night. But I mean, just looking at the sort of reviews and success it had critically, it still had good reviews. So the Rolling Stone and also Billboard put it in sort of the 80s out of 100. Commercially, it only sold sort of 2.5 million records worldwide, from what I could look at. So that's a lot less than Only by the Night. And as opposed to Only by the Night, a lot of critics hated the album and said it was a bit too pandering and gloomy. So, I mean, talking about the songs itself, I think it would be a bit too reductive to sort of go through the album and discuss each track individually, as there aren't sort of many deep cuts and every track isn't really a notable one. And I know that sounds like a very negative statement, but it really isn't. I do like the majority of it. But I think the one that is most important, or the one we should touch on first, would be the second track, which is Radioactive. I think with this track itself, it's trying too heavily to replicate the success of Sex on Fire. The main riff has got sort of a lot of the same characteristics. It's played on the low E string of the guitar. It sort of opens the track like Sex on Fire, opens with a riff. And there's sort of, the chorus is quite sparse in its lyrics and themes. And yeah, it's also interesting as well, because if you listen to the album in full, the deluxe version, there's a version of the track where the West Angeles Mass Choir join it. So they, as far as I can tell, they're sort of like a gospel choir. And they sing a lot on the chorus, and I just feel like it brings more energy to the track. And I almost feel like they should have released this version of the song, because it's just, I feel like it brings a bigger statement. But yeah, had you guys listened to this track? What were your thoughts on it?
So, I loved it again. I think I have found the formula to keep me happy, and the Kings of Leon are they're writing it. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed how sort of positive it is. There's like I think it was this one. Yeah, it definitely was. There's like an arpeggiating high triad. Love that. Really cool. And I actually do agree with you though. I think if they included the West Angeles Mass Choir in that, make that the release, I think that probably would have lent it more energy. I've not listened to that version, but just from what you've said, I quite agree with you. It's quite funny as well because despite the fact the points you've made in relation to that track with Sex on Fire, I didn't really put it in the same category, to be honest with you. I didn't put it in there. I just really enjoyed it.
I think it's great. I think the gospel choir is like such a good addition to their sound. It really works. I think it, and like with Back Down South, which I don't know if it was the second single, but it was a big single, that had that charm, and it was nice to hear them actually sound like where they came from, which ironically I've just now heard that's one of the lyrics on Radioactive, isn't it? It's like, but I think that's what's good. I think that's the good thing about the album, is that it does sound like them, where their roots are. It's not a Back to the Roots album, but I just think they kind of went, well, we can't go anywhere further with this album, and I think they chose the right place to go. This used to be my kind of album to walk to work and back quite a lot, so I really spent a lot of time investing in it. Mary, I really liked. It has that 50s, 60s style of instrumentation and chord progression. I think that's really, really strong. But then you kind of get to stuff like Mi Amigo and Pickup Truck. Like maybe from like track 10 to track 13, like the last kind of 4 tracks. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to have them. Definitely the most bloated filler that they've had on a record so far. Maybe as a cohesive album, this is the weakest one they put out at that point.
Yeah, I definitely
I'd maybe argue that the first album then is second in line.
Yeah, I feel like you're definitely right there. And exactly that's what I was going to come on to with the sort of tracks in the middle of the album, like you mentioned, Mary and Back Down South. They've clearly got those country influence. And I think they're trying to replicate the sound from Aha Shake Heartbreak, and they're trying to bring some of that sort of softer side back into the album. And I think that's why I feel like they're trying to have it both ways with this one, because they're trying to replicate Only by the Night and that success with the tracks like You Somebody and Sex on Fire. So these big indie sort of anthems. I think if you listen to Pyro as well on that album, it's got very On Call vibes, if you're familiar with that track. And I feel like they're just trying to replicate that success and as well add sort of their own influences. I don't know, maybe if they felt like only they weren't happy with sort of the success in a way that Only by the Night brought them, because maybe they felt like they were diluting their sound. And it's quite interesting as well when you like look at the stories from these tracks. So Back Down South opens with a pedal steel guitar, and it's actually the first thing that Matthew Followill like played when he bought just the pedal steel guitar, that opening riff and stuff like that is definitely nice, and it works well, like you mentioned, Martin, with sort of the country influences and trying to sound like where they came from. It works really well, but again, the album's sort of brought down by the last few tracks, like you mentioned, Mi Amigos and No Money, Pickup Truck, and they're just sort of mediocre sort of indie songs, and I feel like the album could have easily sort of just lived without those songs there. That's sort of my thoughts on the album in its entirety. I think I'll be one to sort of definitely hype up the album. Well, not hype it up, but defend it, I think is a good way of putting it. I think Kings of Leon have gone on and sort of made maybe worse albums since even. So I think it's lost to time, and that is the problem with sort of 2008 to 2010. So a lot of indie bands were dying. I'm looking at a quote now from Johnny Borrell, who was the lead singer of Razorlight, and he said, "Sex on Fire is basically the apex, death, and afterlife of landfill indie all in one go." And I don't know if you know the term landfill indie, but it's basically attributed to that sort of era and those sort of UK bands like Kaiser Chiefs, Razorlight, just sort of where indie went and died. So, but again, I applaud the Kings of Leon for trying something new on Come Around Sundown, or at least going back to some of their older roots. And it's definitely an album just worth checking out, especially if you like that kind of music.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think their later albums, they kind of got stuck in a rut musically, and it was almost like they then became a parody of what indie rock was, and they never sounded like that.
Definitely.
They were the alternative to that indie scene, and now they're doing all these, what I would call, like what I was saying with Merritt about the Motown Classics album, like imagine what you think indie is, kind of funky drumming, articulate drumming with like little fast pickety kind of guitars. Like that is the Kings of Leon sound that they've kind of gone for the last kind of 3 albums. But what I like about Come Round Sundown, it's a completely different sounding record, but then it's what they've done is they've put their foot back into the album before it. So they've gone, don't worry, like these songs will please these people. So you're not getting too much of a difference. They kind of gone in the middle, haven't they? They've done something different, but they've also done some stuff which is the same. So they're falling into that kind of middle ground there where they haven't ditched everyone completely. But I do agree. I think it's none of their other albums sound like this. I would put it higher than maybe something like Walls. Mechanical Bull is pretty good as well. I think that's got like Beautiful War, and it's got pretty good solid songs on there. Again, you're falling into indie rock territory that they didn't really, that I don't want them to sound like for me. But I definitely think Come Around Sundown is interesting. It's an attractive album, and I think the singles are great. And it's just a shame for that album that it just can't. It had to die with Only by the Night. It had to get obscured. But definitely, I think if someone likes Kings of Leon now and had never heard Come Around Sundown, they'd be pleasantly surprised, and it'd be like a breath of fresh air. And it's like, I want them to go back to that sound. This album's more than fine. I think it's pretty darn good.
I think you're right there. And as well, like looking at the releases after Come Around Sundown, like Mechanical Bull, and you've got tracks like Don't Matter, which I didn't even realise that's them trying to sound like Molly's Chambers and going back to their sort of original sound. Completely. But I think it's definitely an album worth listening to, even if you just like indie music in general. I'd recommend it. And like I said, it sort of was the death of indie sort of at that point. And as well, the Kings of Leon weren't in a good place themselves. So in 2011, they had to abandon the gig after Caleb Followill was basically drunk and stormed off stage. He basically said to the crowd, "Oh, I'm gonna vomit and grab a beer," and sort of left and didn't come back for the rest of the gig. So,
Wow.
I think, yeah, and I think as well the band, they've always been plagued with sort of that problem. Well, not even a problem. They just enjoy their drink and they like to party, basically. And I think at that moment, sort of after the success of Only by the Night, I think it was time that they crashed. And I think they did actually. They went on a 6-month hiatus after that before coming back. But yeah, any more thoughts on the album in general, The Kings of Leon, from either of you?
Which one should I listen to?
What album?
Yeah, which one?
Yeah, I'd start. I think you'd enjoy their first one, Merit, a lot, because it is basically just a blues rock album. It's got thick riffs and it hits hard, so I'd definitely start with that one, and then after Aha Shake Heartbreak, which again I still think's their best album, so definitely listen to the first two, and I think that might give you a different side to what you've heard on Only by the Night and Come Around Sundown that we've discussed.
Yeah, before I forget, actually, we got a new patron, didn't we, Merritt?
Oh, yes, we did.
We did.
Welcome
And
to
I want
the
to shout
family.
him out because I don't know if Jack knows this, but I originally was going to do a guest spot with this person, and we were going to talk about the episode of classic albums that we just can't get into and we can't like no matter how hard we try. And it was all kind of sorted out. I gave him a general date. I was like, maybe around this time. And so we'd sat down at the weekend, we'd sort of stuff with Jack, organised everything, how it was going to go. And I think on the Monday, I got a message from him and he went, all good for the episode coming up? And I was like, oh no. And he'd done all this work. So I was like, really sorry, buddy. Can we do next week? So O'Sheen, O'Grady, and we met at BIM, absolute legend.
Jinx,
Love that from
Padlock
both of you. Exactly. He will be on the podcast next week discussing our classic albums that you just for some reason you just can't get. It's just something about it you just can't connect with. You just don't like him. But yes, thanks very much, O'Sheen. Thanks very much, to
Legend,
everyone
absolute legend.
who
You're a
signs up
legend
for
of rock and
Patreon.
roll. Your videos are amazing. Come and see me in Bristol. We'll have a coffee. I am not going to call you a silly goose.
He'll call you a silly goose, if anything.
Yeah, exactly.
If anything.
We need to make a silly goose and not a silly goose list and see who's on it. But the fact that Merritt is on the silly goose list himself,
Oh yeah,
it's great.
you can't go. You
Please
can't go
make
around.
that a t-shirt.
Yeah, silly goose list. You can't go round calling people silly gooses without being a silly goose yourself.
I think that's applicable to all of life, you know.
Pure
I'm gonna
philosophy.
Keep that with me. Pure philosophy.
Pure philosophy.
Anyways,
£3 a month, and I'm laying my heart on the line. Yeah.
Oh, gotta
Have
love it, eh?
that.
So, have that up, yeah, whatever. So, I looked at the biggest selling artists of all time. I wanted to go for whoever's hit the toppermost of the poppermost. And, you know, they've hit this massive accolade that not a lot of people get. And I found Eminem, you know.
Not the Crazy Frog.
With that, not Crazy Frog, no, I mean, close. You know, the Frog is untouchable and unbeatable in his own regard. But, you know, Eminem, he's all right compared to Crazy Frog. But, you know, Eminem, most successful rapper, no question. Generally the first authentic white rapper really to the mainstream public. Just going to list off some of his accolades for you. So estimated total sales of 200 million. He's the biggest selling artist of the 2000s.
Jesus.
5 best rap album awards over 11 years. The first rapper to win an Academy Award for 8 Mile. The 2 biggest opening week album sales of any rapper in history. So for the Eminem Show, he did 1.31 million. And for Marshall Mathers LP, he did 1.76 million in a week, first week. Only artist to have 10 consecutive number 1 albums on Billboard 200 out of any genre. So big deal. And I'm going to look at Encore, which was released November 12th, 2004, which comes after the Eminem Show. So if we look at his life around this time, obviously he did Infinite in 1996, which is like an underground kind of hip-hop album, which he was kind of still finding his feet, and then was going to quit music. He had a daughter at this time. He had a very bad relationship with his wife, I believe at the time, like his girlfriend, who he's definitely talked about killing and whatnot on subsequent albums since. I think he was going to kill himself and he's going to give up rap. But then I think he went to California or LA, met up with Dr. Dre. Rest is history. So he gets very, very successful on his second record, and then Marshall Mathers LP and Eminem Show. So let's just kind of look around of his life at this point. So he's trying to make the follow-up to a very, very, very big album at the height of his fame. So he's released the Slim Shady LP, then the Marshall Mathers LP, then stars in 8 Mile and releases the Eminem Show, all of which have propelled him into superstardom, which no rapper had ever experienced at this point, becoming a threat to the younger audience of kids who basically bleached their hair, and I definitely tried to master the verses of the real Slim Shady without the CD on. That was definitely a thing that people did around that time. That was kind of like an icebreaker. If you could rap that, you're cool. You are cool, Marv.
I
yeah?
must be cool then.
Cool. Exactly. So he's got a lawsuit from his mum. He got arrested for pistol whipping a bouncer for kissing his wife, and he was on probation. All of the extracurricular things that come with famous success: alcohol, drugs, money, sex, women, everything you want, all whilst raising a daughter with his ex-wife that he wrote songs about killing her. And it's amazing that he made 1 critical and commercial album, let alone 3, which is just insane. The Eminem Show being the biggest. Oh, and he produced the posthumous Tupac album around that time as well. So it's like how much the work ethic of this guy, that either he had to be put into or wanted to do, and he realized that, like, okay, I'm at my peak, let's just maintain, let's keep going. It's just horrifying. It's so much stuff. He was that famous and influential to the world that he was in. And we look at Encore now. There was a leaked track called We as Americans, which was bashing George Bush at that time. He had a lyric that was basically he'd rather see George Bush dead. That was what he said. That the Secret Service investigated him, went over to his house and was like, we're treating this as a threat. And he's there like,
crazy.
I'm just a rapper, like I'm just messing with stuff. But like that was how serious people took Eminem, and that was how much of an impact he had in the world around him. That like he said stuff like that and people were like, oh my, like you are going to do that and freak out. So, I mean, the cracks had to show somewhere. So, Encore, to me, it's got so many facets to it. You look at the thing I just listed off in terms of what he's done around this point. That maybe he's overworked, and then you've got drugs, and then you've got arrests, and then you've got lawsuits. That you could view it more like his drug album, but I just think that trying to follow up something as big as that is just very impossible. So it got rush released because some of the songs got leaked to the internet, and I think a downfall for this album is that he had to write songs very, very quickly to put them back on. So there's some songs that were written in like half an hour, and there's no time to edit there. You've got pressures there, and you just got to go and record it. Let's make anything we can. You can't necessarily sit and think over them. So whatever you're saying, you are putting on there. Now let's talk about kind of like his addiction to pills, which really was come to the forefront on Encore. It was kind of a thing that he found a magic balance. Obviously, there was that thing of him popping Molly with Dr. Dre in the studio, and they came up with My Name Is, and it took about half an hour to kind of make. Amazing, great. So when he was doing 8 Mile, the working days were about 16 hours. Now, he said he had 6 hours of downtime. 2 of those hours of the 6 hours were 1 hour driving to and from set. So he had 4 hours to sleep. And someone gave him some Ambien. Because when you're tired, it kind of perks you up, I guess. So this is what he says started off this kind of pill addiction, which, as we know, he got onto like methadone and got up to about 60 pills a day. And that's just, I think, with Ambien. And then about 30 Vicodins too, which is a powerful painkiller. And then he was doing methadone, and I think he overdosed. He said himself he was about 2 hours away from death, was having organ failure, and he managed to stay clean. He said after I think he detoxed, he was up for 3 weeks straight, not even feeling tired. He said 3 weeks straight, I was just awake. The fact that like all of this was happening at the height of his fame kind of helped to like funnel the lackluster reception towards this, because a lot of these things we only know after the fact. So this album really kind of got critically panned. It was viewed as kind of his worst work at that time. Eminem doesn't really like it that much. He thinks this and Relapse are his two weakest records, and I definitely don't disagree with him.
Yeah.
This whole album is definitely a good exploration into like Eminem's brain at the time. You could say that a lot of the tracks are like lackluster and are just bloated and don't really say much. But if you think about Eminem's kind of brain fog and on a lot of those pills, and that he maybe doesn't even know what he was doing or could even maybe recount some of those days, you are actually getting a very true to life version of what he was thinking, even if it was just nothing in particular, or he wants to do a million accents in one song, or do a song that I think the hook is noises of him farting and burping, and in a British accent goes caca poo poo. From a guy who sold like 20 million albums at that point with the two records, and on his biggest, like everyone's looking into it and go, what's he going to do next? And he's gone caca poo poo. Like, that's bold. That is bold.
Yeah, it's funny with a lot of songs on this album. So at this time was the time where I was basically watching a lot of music channels. And I remember at this stage, so Pass and Marshall Mathers LP and stuff like that, I remember these songs actually coming out at the time, like Toy Soldiers and Mockingbird. And when you think about those songs alone, they're like very heavy hitting. They like touch on a lot of important themes about him and his relationship with his daughter. And then when you mix it in with things like Just Lose It, which I think you just mentioned, and then as well, like Ass Like That, it's just, so it's like two different mindsets, basically. And I mean, the album itself, like looking at the track listing, it's 20 tracks long, so you're going to have a lot of variety. But yeah, it's just such a weird amalgamation of thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, it's definitely like in extremes of his silliness and his seriousness, you get the extremes here. It's just the fact that you kind of get a lot of stuff in the middle of those. And unfortunately, because they don't do either silliness or seriousness, they kind of just fall by the wayside. So I'd argue that this is the most fillery album. And again, we're getting this theme here quite a lot, aren't we? A lot of the album, all the albums we've talked about have a lot of filler. I think the most silly and crass is My First Single. Like I said, the chorus is just farts and burps and saying poo poo caca. The music's not really that memorable. It has that Aftermath sound, which like dominated the airwaves at that point. But it's still just a boring instrumental. I think that, and it's 5 minutes long as well. So to have 5 minutes long of just that is, I don't know. But Rain Man, again, another quickly written song, is very hilarious, very unabashed. Again, shows his funny side. And the fact that the luxury to just kind of sit and edit the lyrics and second guess can't be done kind of helps for the song to live. You know, you could view it definitely as like what the real Slim Shady in My Name Is could it be as like a first draft. It has that feeling of like a first draft of those songs. Yet we're just hearing it just like some of it makes no sense and it's just very like it just needs a bit of craft to it. But I actually quite like that it's just as it is because it reflects how Eminem was feeling at that time. You know, very much just spur of the moment that had to be done. Show me another artist in this biggest selling album of all time club that is like this unhinged and willing to put songs like the three I've just mentioned, My First Single, Rain Man, Big Weenie, even Just Lose It, onto an album they know would sell millions and be dissected. So this is the 250 million plus club. The Beatles, Elvis, Michael Jackson, Elton John, Madonna, Led Zeppelin, Rihanna, Pink Floyd. And then Eminem's bracket, which is 200 to 249 million. Taylor Swift, Mariah Carey, Queen, Eagles, Whitney Houston, Celine Dion, AC/DC, Rolling Stones. Now, out of all of those artists, I don't think any of them have done anything as raw and unhinged at their critical commercial peak as Eminem has done. Whether he was aware of it or not, if he was too clouded, but he must have had some sort of train of thought. I think to be that raw and unhinged and just like unapologetic, like this is me, I'm just going to be completely silly wherever I want to, do what I want because I know it will sell, but this is me.
The way he describes and paints a picture compared to other artists and things is just as you say, there's no better word for it. It's incredibly raw. It's incredibly salt in the wound, if you will. It's very, very, you're going to feel this. You know what I mean? The only artist I'd compare him to would be Lennon, sort of 69, 70. As we spoke about, singing Cold Turkey with a band he's not played with before, whilst he's super sick from heroin withdrawal. I feel like Lennon was just as real with his lyrics.
Yeah, I think just the point you were saying about the fact that it is so pure and it is unadulterated and just Eminem sort of at his rawest, in terms of how he's feeling at the time. That clearly comes out, and it does with stuff like Toy Soldiers and the sort of stories he's telling about how he's feeling at the time. It's all there basically on paper, and it's take it or leave it. And at this point, like we said, with the amount of success that he had, why not create an album like that? And you know, if it gets panned or if it gets loved, then just take it or leave it and move on. But you put it on paper, so
exactly. And you know, you've got 2 albums. I think I said 3, but 3 including, I'd say, Encore, because it sold really well. But 2 albums that are like your biggest commercial and critical peaks. Like, just surely that's enough for the average listener. Like, don't be so harsh on the guy. Like, he's done, you know, a really successful film and then 2 of these amazing albums. It's like, no, some bands and artists that you adore and love and respect never even get to that point. Yet you give them so much less slack. But it's because he's in that upper echelon, which then gives you up to criticism. Because people go, well, I don't like him. He don't deserve that. He don't deserve that. Oh, that's not very good. Oh, he's doing fart and burpee sounds. That's terrible. What's the point? But it's like, no. Like, you don't realize, like, to sell that much, that isn't just a marketing and promotion thing. You look at all these albums and they are of amazing quality. They have something there which you just cannot buy or promote or have exposure. They're the reason why they are in that place, no matter how you feel about the person's work. I think the best moments are never enough because Nate Dogg's on it, and anything that Nate Dogg's on is great. Like Toy Soldiers, I think Ass Like That is good, and I think Mockingbird is great. The instrumental to spend some time. It's got nice dynamics and a good emotional tension, like we get in like Toy Soldiers. But the lyrics are just wasted. It's just about women that have wronged Eminem, Obi Trice, and 50 Cent, and it's all just sexual objectification and very of that time, which would not float now. But the instrumental was great. I wish that the instrumentals here were across all of the album. That would have pushed it up majorly, because I think the big point is that the instrumentals are just a bit cookie cutter and unmemorable. Just Lose It seems to get a lot of hate. I read one review and the guy was like, this is the worst track off of Encore. And to me, I'm like, I think it's one of the best. I think this is one of his best singles.
It's got a weak chorus, I think. It's just a quite blur chorus, but I think the verses themselves are kind of stand out. I definitely wouldn't call it the worst song on that album.
Neither would I. Just Lose It that's my jam. Shut up.
If you want to listen to more of the thing that sounds really good, go listen to that album. That's why it's there. Be appreciative that a band that you could find and people have made this music and given it to you because it belongs to you now. Just be glad that's there.
This is the point, though, isn't it? And this is our mission statement and what we repeat and we find ourselves saying every single episode. It might not be an album you love, but go and look at the context and you might get some answers as to why you don't love it as much as you thought you should.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Eminem says a really good quote here about how people should view his music. He says, I've always felt in touch with the people who listen to my music. I make it for them. Anybody else, F them. It's fine if critics or whoever keep thinking I'm not as good as I was. So what I'm looking for, whatever the response or the sales, is things I did right or things I could have improved musically. I'm critical of myself, and I'm always trying to figure out how to do better. I certainly have not had a perfect career. I've put out bad albums. And he says, Encore's mediocre and with Relapse. You should be glad that, they live here. So that's all I've really got to say on that.
Now we're out of the subject very slightly. I did have a shout out to give, and that was to Mrs. T, my partner's mum. She listens every single week, and she wanted a shout out. So here it is, Mrs. T. You're a rock and roll legend, and don't stop being you.
Shout out to Mrs. T.
Mrs. T, don't be a silly goose.
She's not a silly goose.
That's the podcast. I feel like that was quite good, quite enjoyable. I feel like we got a lot of good things from each other there. And DM us. We want to know what you think about these things. What do you think are some of the worst follow-up albums? And can you defend them? And did they get more flack than they should? If you got any opinions or comments of what the albums that we've picked, and we just want to hear you. We want to hear what you think. Massive thanks to Jack.
Big thanks.
Coming on. It's been
pleasure.
absolutely amazing.
I loved it.
It's been great.
Pleasure's
Thank
all
you
mine.
for staying here for nearly 3 hours here that we come and talk. And take it away. Tell us about what you're doing. Tell us outro. Tell us the songs. Tell us what you're up to. And plug yourself, boy.
Go.
Yeah, so first I'm going to plug you two. So check out Afrolene. And I believe it's James_Merritt_guitar.
You got it, my boy. You got it.
Perfect. Two boys coming in the game. And I can't wait for you to release your stuff and your new album. It's killer. So yeah, that's the first thing I want to say. And then basically, yeah, I'm going to lead us out with a track that hopefully will be on this short release I make, this EP, of sort of post-rocky, soundtracky type songs. This one's very 80s inspired. It's called Rat Racer. So I think we're going to hear a snippet of it now. And yeah, if you like it, follow my Instagram at Loops and Landscapes. And yeah, hopefully I'll join you back on the podcast soon and we can discuss another topic.
Would love that.
Marvin ramble on about Eminem.
Would love that.
Exactly. What we'll do is we'll have you back on and it will be the same subject. And then we'll do the same thing again, how we feel, plus another 3 more hours.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that'd be great.
9 hours long.
Now we'll get you back on. 9 hours long, exactly. 2000th episode special. But next week is going to be with our now rescheduled guest star and newest patron, whatever you want to call it, O'Sheen. And we're going to do the subject of classic albums that for some reason you just don't like, you can't get into. Something's just not right there. So maybe we'll have a change of heart and we'll have a little picks. Yeah, we'll lead you out with Jack's track.
Lovely.
Rat Racer, is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's right.
Got it there. I even heard it like 15 seconds ago.
Nice one, Marv.
Have a good one. Have a good week. I'm really tired. More tired than you two. So whatever. I'm gone.
Bye, Marv. Bye, Jack. Thanks. You're
See ya.
lovely and sexy, and I love you.
Too far.